Okay, so we're in the workshop today and I read all your comments that you put onto our channel. So don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Now, one of the comments was, I'm really into monster trucks, but I don't understand how they work. And this was by Jake. So Jake, this is a, I had it in my head a minute ago. Autopsy. No, that's when you're dead. No. This is how a monster truck works. Okay, so this is my monster truck Swamp Thing here in the UK. So at the moment it's on its transport wheels and we're doing some work on it. So this is a perfect time to show you how a monster truck works. So they may look like a pickup. When you come inside, there is no pickup bits on them at all. So most modern monster trucks are on a space frame chassis. So this is all made out of CDS steel, 2 inches with a 3.2mm wall thickness, so it's quite a heavy tube compared to most forms of motorsport. In the middle, so they're mid-mounted. Some people say the engines are in the back. When they're in the, well, if you say it is in the back, it'd actually be behind the rear axle. So something like a Porsche has got a rear-mounted V8 engine. But the monster trucks have a mid-mounted engine, so it's in between the axles. It's not dead in the middle. If it was be dead in the middle, it would be actually here. But so it's towards the rear. The reason for that is weight distribution, trying to keep the weight as even as we can. On some of the more modern monster trucks, the engines are even further in. Now this is a fairly old monster truck in this style of monster truck. But yeah, so we've got a huge V8 engine. This one's 575 cubic inch. We run it on methanol. So the methanol comes in to the engine through there. So that's the fuel lines. But on my monster truck, it has even more fuel lines because I actually have fuel lines in the bottom as well. So I've got 8 injectors in the top and 1 per cylinder. So this one actually calls the supercharger. This is the supercharger on the engine. It's 871, and the maximum we're allowed to overdrive it. So if you change the different pulleys between the top pulley and the bottom pulley, it's a bit like changing the gears on your mountain bike. You can affect how fast that top pulley goes round, and we're allowed a maximum of 10% to be overdriven, and that's what it is. The idea of this is to try and limit the horsepower of the engine. By restricting how much air goes in, it restricts how much fuel you can add. And that's the easiest way to restrict an engine, is to restrict how much air it's got. So some former NASCARs, they used to have to run a restrictor plate. So the hole they would actually let the fuel into, so the air into the engine was a lot smaller, would limit the horsepower. So the fuel tank on my one and most monster trucks, the fuel tank is in the back, and the fuel tank is connected to the fuel pump. So there's the fuel line that comes out the fuel tank, and we follow that along. It comes up to the fuel pump there. So the fuel pump can be driven on a belt, but this one is actually directly off the camshaft. So the camshaft comes through and connects to the fuel pump. And this is what they call mechanical fuel injection. Mechanical fuel injection means there's no electronics with it. The only way we can change how much fuel is in the engine is either by changing the injectors or by returning more fuel to the fuel tank. So the way the fuel goes back, so the fuel comes into the engine, up on that one, and then it comes to the back injectors, it goes to the lower injectors, and then we got a couple of high-speed bypasses, and that's the one that returns the fuel to the engine. So this is like the metering block. And also we can change how much fuel goes back to the engine by changing this little piece in here. So inside here is a very, very small hole. If you wanted to make the truck run leaner, you would actually put a bigger hole in that, so it actually return more fuel back to the tank. So that's how that part of it works. So hope you're getting this, Jake. Yeah, so that's the engine part. So the engine then connects to the gearbox, which is in here. So This is a turbo 400. This is quite common in a monster truck. All the other gearbox you might hear people talking about is a power glide or a cone 2-speed. So a cone 2-speed is what it says. It's a 2-speed gearbox. This is a turbo 400, which is a 3-speed gearbox. The other thing that people do change in them is how they work. So we're saying it's an automatic gearbox, but you have to change gear manually. So if you look up in there, you can still see where I've been washing it. There's the gear stick. So if I put it into 3rd gear, it would start in 3rd gear. It wouldn't go 1, 2, 3 like in an automatic car. So after the transmission, the power's gone through the engine, through the gearbox, then we go into the transfer case. The transfer case is the thing that makes it 4-wheel drive. This is what splits the drive up between the front and the back axle. So the transfer case is located there, and you might notice that the top cover is different to the rest of it. That is so we can actually change the gear ratios in the top. So we could, a bit like on the Supercharger, we can put different gears to speed it up or slow it down. And then it comes down through solid gears. They're 2 inches wide, and then that's where it splits up the drive. So that's the prop shaft coming out the front. And now, because I've got the batteries and everything in the middle, there's another little prop shaft through there, and then it connects to the rear one. So that's the rear drive. So you follow the drive all the way through, and then this is an interesting bit about monster trucks. Monster trucks have what they call pinion brakes. So that's the brakes there. We have one brake on the front and one brake on the rear. Reason for that is this prop shaft in there will spin round 25 times before the wheel will spin round once, because we got reduction in the differential, which is that big piece there, and that puts the drive through and comes out into here. Now that doesn't connect directly to the wheel. That actually connects to this, which is part of the planetary system. So this, if I spin it over, it's still oily. I've just taken it off. So that piece there slots onto this. So this bit doesn't spin round at all. What does spin round are the gears that connect to this. So the gears are in the planetary. Oh, really heavy doing this one-handed. I hope that wasn't too loud. It was pretty loud here. So that is where the drive shaft connects into there. So the drive shaft spins round, and you can see that all spins. So that spins these, which connects into that. So this is another gearbox to make the gear reduction better for those huge 66-inch tyres. That's how big a monster truck tyre is. It's 66 inches, they're 43 inches wide, and they go onto a 25-inch rim. So that's the drive line of the monster truck. Other interesting things about it is the suspension. So on most cars you have a spring. On this monster truck we don't have any springs. The only spring we have is an anti-roll bar, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So on my monster trucks, they're 26-inch travel shocks, front and back. They're both identical. The only thing that's changed a little bit is they're valved up stiffer in the back, because the engine is heavier in the back than it is in the front. So on my one, I've got individual bypasses. So this is what we call a stage 2 shock. A stage 1 shock, the oil comes out the shock there on this stage 2. On a stage 1, it will come out the top and go into the accumulator, which is the accumulator here. And inside the accumulator, there's a piston about there. And on this side of it, we have nitrogen, and on the other side, we have the oil. So the oil goes all the way through in there. So as this shaft comes up, it pushes on the piston, and this ram actually displaces the oil, and the oil has to go out into the accumulator, which pushes on the puck, which pushes on the nitrogen, which gives us our suspension. So that's how the suspension works on this monster truck. The only difference about this one's a stage 3. It comes off exactly the same at the bottom, except we can actually bypass the piston with these tubes to make it the compression ratio different through the travel on the suspension. So that's the only difference between a stage 2 and a stage 3, and a stage 1, it's connected at the top there. That's the only difference. Some of them you might see with King coilovers on it. The coilover, if you had a coilover, it still works exactly the same, except you've got a coil in here and you can run a lot lower pressures because of that. This is the control link for the anti-roll bar. So this arm here is connected to this anti-roll bar. So this is a string steel. So if the suspension was going up and they were both in level, it would do that. This would just turn, and the arms will go in parallel with each other. But if this wheel went up and this one didn't, it'd actually try and twist this. So as it tries to twist it, it would actually try and level the truck back out when it's got the weight back on it. So that is what they call an anti-roll bar, or if you're in America, they call that a sway bar. On the monster trucks, everything that rotates has a guard on it. So you probably noticed when we was looking at the transmission, it had a big blanket around it. The side of the engine, it's got these plates here. That's in case it throws a rod out the side of the engine, so it stops piece coming out. Round the prop shafts, it's got guards around the prop shafts, around the supercharger on the other side. So this side hasn't got a guard around it, but there's no fuel line. So if this broke, this is to protect all the fuel lines on the other side. And that's that part of it. I'm just going to pause the video here now so I can go and get this oil off my hand, so then I can take it into the cab. Okay, so we're climbing on up in. It's still a bit dusty. I haven't finished cleaning in here yet because we've just come back from a show. Oh, and I've just washed all the outside, but we don't wash the inside because of all the electrics in here. So this is the inside of the cab on a monster truck. Very, very minimal. There's not a lot in there at all. You've just got a few gauges. And here's the gear stick. So let's talk you through how it all works. Gear stick on this monster truck, some of them have a gated shifter. When I say gated, it means you actually have to pull it in and out. This one doesn't. This is a ratchet shifter, so you can just go through the gears. So that'll be reverse. If I turn it on now, the reversing bleeper will go off.
This monster truck is reversing. This monster truck is reversing.
All right, to get it out of there, we can go straight back up into park. So so on this gearbox, you go 1, 2. That's reverse. That next gear is neutral. So neutral now, you can't accidentally select reverse. The way you'd have to select reverse is to push this lever forward, and now you can get reverse. If I come back out of it, see that one move straight away? Now I can't get reverse. And then the gears on mine, so normally on a Turbo 400, if you pull back that one, that would be third gear. On this one, it's first gear. So we go first, second, third, and that's it. And to go back, we just do the same again, and then neutral, and then we can't get reverse until we lift that. Well, that's that part of it done. So let's do the next part. So the next thing we've got all the controls up here. So we got a starter button, we've got the ignition button there. So if we turn that one on, that comes on, so that knows the ignition on. That's the ignition on, but also it's also the oil pressure warning light. So we've got voltmeter, temperature gauge, water, and oil pressure. So normally this monster truck on tick over runs between 60 and 70 psi on tick over. And this light will come on if it's anything below 40. So if that comes on when I'm driving it, we're shutting the engine off. This is a rev gauge. The rev limiter chip I've got, oh, my finger was chumping into the thing there. Let's turn that off because it's a bit bright, that is. You can also probably hear, you can see there, that's the water pump. That's so we know the water pump's on. If I pull this lever, that's the transmission fan. And this one I've got to get a new one for this. The bulb's broken, but if I flick that, you can hear it clicking. So that I've got a new bulb for that, but that's actually the fans that are actually on the engine, on the radiator. So let's turn that off, it's a bit quieter and you don't get the reflection. So this is the rev counter. At the moment I've got a 7,000 RPM chip in it, so my monster truck is capable of revving to 9,000, but we've got a 7,000 chip in there. And this is probably the most important thing on a monster truck. This is a remote ignition interrupter. If you've seen me at the shows, we test this before every single time we do a jump. So it's a remote control just for the monster truck's engine. It doesn't do anything else. If the crew person or anybody else with the transmitter sees anything they don't like with a monster truck, they can physically, without even trying to get in contact with the driver, they have the ability to shut the engine off instantly. And I've had it happen in a show where we was doing a show and a dog ran into the arena. I was actually driving away from the dog, so the dog's behind me. I'm not going to run it over, but they shut the truck off anyway and got the dog back to its owner, and everybody was happy. The unusual thing about monster trucks though is the steering. So the front wheels are steered with a steering wheel, which is quite common in a car, but the back is steered on this. This is a toggle switch, and this is like a joystick for turning the monster truck wheels. So you can just do that to turn the wheels. And on my monster truck, if I want to turn left, I push it to the right, because actually that's the way, if the wheels were on it, that's the way the wheels would turn, so you could go left. So if I want to turn left, I push it right. If I want to go right, I push it left. This little button here brings the wheels back to the center. So I don't have to worry about if I'm doing a crab steer and I want the truck to go straight, just pull that button, the wheels go straight on the back, and there's a couple of little switches on the back axle that do that. And just the other things that's in here, it's got a fire extinguisher system. There's 2 of them. So there's a plumbed in one, which is on this little T handle, and that's what does the plumbed in one. And just under my feet, there's another one there. So if there's a little fire and I want to put it out, I can actually use that one. The big one, it's going to look a bit weird, this is. I don't know if you can see it. No, you can't see it. The big one is under the seat. What else is there in here? Also, we have only 2 pedals in the monster truck. So we've got one for go and one for stop. This is a throttle, so if the throttle gets stuck, we can actually pull back on the top of that. And we literally just drive with 1 foot in the throttle and 1 foot on the brake. And on mine, I've got a little pad there, so I can rest my foot on it and go between the 2. You don't want to go around with that resting on the brakes. It makes the brakes get really hot. So just go from there to there, back of there, and that's it. Oh yeah, fuel. So as I was saying, it's mechanical fuel injection. So we've got a mechanical switch. So this actually turns the fuel off on the engine. So when my truck's running, it's out. And it's, if you read what it says there, it's push for off. So you can push that and that shuts the fuel off. And as you push that in, you'd hear the revs go up on the engine as it's running out of fuel. And then we've got a couple of other lights here. So these ones here are for the headlights. These ones are the green lights. That one there is for that. So I've got a little electric heater in here that blows on the windscreen, because sometimes we're doing a show and it's really cold and we can get a lot of condensation on the plastic, so we can actually heat that up to stop that. And I've just got a couple of little other controls down here, but that's just to do with the rear steering. So for any reason this starts playing up, I've got bypass switches here, so I can bypass the self-centering, and that little light just tells me that the electric steering pump is running, because on the back it's got a hydraulic motor that actually does the steering. So it's a bit like a tail lift on a lorry. It's a lorry motor, so that's what makes the fluid go up and down. And the steering on the monster truck on the front axle is from a power steering pump that's mounted on the engine, and that comes directly into the steering wheel, which goes down on the hydraulic lines to the steering rams that does the steering. I hope you enjoyed that, Jake, and I hope the other people who've stayed to watch the end of the video, please share, like and subscribe my videos. And of course, if you put a comment and you want to see a specific video, I'm going to do one just for you. Until next time, bye-bye.